Awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost there. I hope most of you are still there because now we have, after 10, 12 minutes, last but not the least, David Byron. And he's going to just fascinate all of us by the way he thinks. I just love and learn from him each and every day as such too. I think we are now in our fourth element as such. I know you already are following us on Instagram or Twitter and all the things that Lanea is asking us to do. Please listen to Lanea. That's the one thing I learned very early as such. So going on to this, let's say next element of talking about who we are and how things are going to happen, right? Means no matter what, I think we know when we talk about user interface, one-on-one interface, that happens right at the center over there, right? Means you might be in your kitchen and let's say working or fighting with your toaster or your dishwasher, or you might be in some other zone as such, trying to use or try to extract a benefit from your product. But eventually that kind of a small category eventually is always let's say molded by the industry, which is literally molded by the society and the cultural effects as such. We cannot escape from that, right? At the center is that one-on-one exchange of human interface and user interface and all those things. But at the end, at the collective elements as such, the entire collective of humanity is, no matter what, molding of what you would eventually expect from the center of that ecosystem as such. And it's happening right now, good, bad, or otherwise. This COVID-19 virus is molding our thoughts as of now and for the next few weeks, where we will be more and more in house arrest. I think that's the call of the many of the nations right now. It will make us think hard. We really are already contemplating on plenty of things, but then earlier there was a big lag to come from this collective of humanity right in the center. But now I think the lag has been reduced a lot less, especially not irrespective of the virus going around. We already see the lag was becoming very less because of augmented reality, because of the way we can use the AI as such. Actually, it should be AW, not AI, because when you talk about data, data goes into information, the I would say, and then it goes into the world of knowledge and then the wisdom. How do you not just artificially, but glean out the real elements of wisdom from what's happening over there and bring to your zone or your ecosystem? So that was happening pretty fast in certain sectors, maybe not that fast in the world of automotive or world of aircraft industry or the world of cruise industry, cruise ship industry as such, or in the world of public transportation as such. That's a pretty long lag over there, but it's going to affect more and more and more over there. But the element is no product can be designed in isolation, right? It will be a silly and idiotic thing to do for anybody, uh, even though you might be only producing that particular element. And that's one of the reason where people come and seek us out as Sundberg-Ferar, where we can literally cross-pollinate, cross-reference, and cross-learn from all these categories to see what is the humanity, what is the psychographics, what is the persona, what are their anticipations, what are their expectations, what do they like, what do they don't like. Both have to be looked in equality, right? When you say we can do polarization and we have to embrace polarization, that also means you have to embrace to see what particularly though they don't like, because no matter what, you're going to put a package together, the arrangement of features and sets for your product and system. You have to make sure that not only you're touching on almost all, I would say, reducing all the pain points, you have to make sure you don't reduce those passion points, those pleasure points as such. So that's what helps us as our design studio to bring in that collective knowledge of last 86 years to the areas that we work. And the main element from them is, I think yesterday we ended the session with saying, stop by being all things to all people, start by being something to someone. And to extend that element together is, as I said, no problem can be solved in isolation. Let's say you're talking about your kitchen. There might be an industry of cabinet making. There might be, not maybe, there is an industry of cabinet making, industry of dishwashers, industry of pots and pans and containers, and then you store the containers in the cabinets too. It's completely different categories, but they're all interconnected. You cannot just say I want to solve one problem from one category and push it on to the other adjoining category. The end user, you and me, if you're in that kitchen, you're going to be tortured, aggravated, and be helpless by the problems that are now thrown into your category. So the entire thing is, as a design studio, what we typically aim is to make sure we understand that ecosystem as a whole and try to solve the problem not just in the category, but to completely extinguish the problems from the entire zone itself. And that's why I would say the gumption, the temperament has to be there to make sure you plan out or map out, not plan, sorry, map out the entire ideal product use experience. When I say product, again, we talked that yesterday morning too. It's always, and I would say the trinity of the hardware, the software, and the servicetization. I don't know whether that word is true or not, but the service part of it also, all those three things combined together becomes the object, the product, the utensil, the implement as such. And then from that, you go and try to make sure you, I would say, not expand, but make sure you align your brand to that, make sure you market to the entire ecosystem, because eventually you're going to make profits, not just by the product, but by the portfolio of products. And then eventually when you're going to grow, and you will grow eventually, then it makes sure that you are already addressing the ecosystem. So if you're, let's say, selling coffee right now, you can sell some scones, you can sell something else, and that's the organic expansion of it. But you can only do that for the sustainability of the business when you start looking at the ecosystem itself. It cannot be, let's just look at this and solve for this. You have to look at everything and solve for this, and then go on expanding your reach, and then try to be a little bit more, I would say, beneficial and stronger as we go forward too. So let me maybe stop right here. We already have, we see Mr. David Byron is there. If you feel free to unmute yourself, and let's start the video on you, Mr. Byron. There he comes. Oh my God. I like it.
Shivak, you're in cold Michigan. I decided to do my virtual work from home and turn my home down into Mexico.
I like it. Where is the cocktail in your hand? I just have a coffee mug over here. You need to have
right.
it.
I should get my a tiki mug out and a little umbrella hat.
Yeah, you should maybe ask Michelle to bring that to you. And like, you are right now sitting there like a king. I like that. I like the sunglasses. Amazing. I think before we start, and eventually you can take control of the screen also, completely okay with that. I think we know your bio, but please share something about you, about your personality. What do you do for fun, and what are your inspirational or motivational elements that you seek out, Dave?
Sure. Yeah. Let me give you let me see this. Well, I'm going to do a little screen share here. Let me make sure that that's showing here. Let's see. How's that? Linnea, confirm. Is that coming through?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome. All right. I'm going to go back up here. So I'm not a born and raised Michigander. I spent my middle school and high school years on the East Coast and the Jersey Shore, but I've lived here in Detroit for 20 years, and I really I feel like part of Detroit and Motor City has always been kind of in my blood. I came here to be a car designer, and as you can see in the photo there, the Celine is a result of a couple of years I spent as lead designer at Celine, and luckily was able to build a car that I designed and have one. And so one of the things I do for fun is I live just a couple miles from Woodward, and it's hard for me to stay thin in the summertime with as many cruises to the ice cream shop I do with my daughter, and go to a lot of car shows around town, and just really I love the car culture here, and it's part of what brought me here to Michigan.
Fantastic. So I think the topic here is innovation pathways as such. I would let you lead through the slides you have, and then till that time we will have plenty of questions lighting the light board, and then we can go through that. So I think the stage is all yours, Dave.
Awesome. Okay, thank you, Jivak. So yeah, I want to kind of have a high-level conversation about my thoughts on building concepts and the power of many. And I'm just going to kind of use some metaphors, and then I'll get into a little bit of some of the meat and potatoes on some of the techniques that we use at Sundberg-Ferar to build innovation pathways. And then, yeah, I'd love to just kind of hear some questions and just have a casual conversation about it. So I think everybody's kind of familiar with Tough Mudder and Spartan races. I'm going to give a little shout out here to our fearless host. If you see down in there in the bottom, that's Mr. Jivak Badve himself tackling Spartan race there. He does everything, and you know, he's got a nice little jacket on there today, but I think he's more comfortable getting dirty and getting out there in the wild. But my point about bringing up Tough Mudder here is the photos there of the wall climb, and how, you know, Jivak, do you think you could get over that wall by yourself?
So basically, I think there are 8 feet walls, 9 feet walls, and if you are in the elite race, you cannot get help from anybody. So there you have to go over the wall by yourself.
Okay,
for the Spartan races.
So if you're a hero, you could get over that wall, but efficiently, and where I'd put my money would be on a team like you see there climbing the wall together. And, you know, these types of slip and slide walls where, you know, there's no way by yourself you're getting up that wall.
Absolutely.
And so the people line up in these lines from head to toe, and they're climbing over each other, and they're getting to the top. And, you know, if you kind of indulge me for a minute here, I as a metaphor, take each one of these people and pretend they're a concept. You know, and the wall is our product development gauntlet that we try and take our concepts and get them through all the rigors of product development and get them to the top of that wall. And, you know, each of these lines now kind of represents, in a way, an innovation pathway, because together you can get up that wall, and concepts, when they're in families, have a much higher likely success rate than singular designs. And what often happens is we try and design like this. We try and design with a single concept, traversing Yosemite, the wall in Yosemite here. And I'm not going to say this doesn't happen. You know, of course, every now and then there's an aha moment. There's this one idea that's just so fantastic, it's going to succeed no matter what. And when it gets to the top of the wall, I think as innovators and designers, we all look at that and we kind of, you know, treat it like a hero, and everybody strives to achieve those one-off aha moments. But singular hero designs are really the exception and not the norm. And especially in larger corporations, they're really hard to get those one-off designs through the pipeline. So I wanted to kind of talk about brainstorming and prioritization and how you get to those ideas. And, you know, in a typical brainstorm session, you're going to bring together, if you're doing it well, a bunch of diversified people and data points. So whether it's consumer insights, whether it's your sales and marketing team, bringing in some research, whether it's technical capabilities, and you've got engineers at the table. You know, if you're doing a good job, you've got a lot of diverse inputs coming into a brainstorm session. And I remember a conversation with one of our clients, and they're a huge global company. And they were really excited about the fact that they had done a brainstorm session and came up with 70 ideas. And hey, anybody here that's run workshops and done an ideation brainstorm session, and I'm not talking about a lunch session, I'm talking about a half day, full day, knockdown, drag out session. If you can come out of that with 70 ideas, like, pat yourself on the back, like you did a good job. But you sit there and you go, oh, it's a success, right? Well, then they got into their whole prioritization issues. And what we find with a lot of teams is that they make the mistake then of turning that activity, which is an organic mind mapping type activity, into a linear list. And so typical prioritization says, okay, well, we've got those 70 ideas. Now let's line them up from the best to the worst. And then after you line those up from the best to the worst, and now I think I've got maybe 20 on the page right now, imagine that list was 70 long, and you're trying to go through there and sift and say, well, which ones should we tackle? And what teams often do is they start to then assign attributes to each of the ideas at the top of the list and say, well, this one was really born out of our safety research. And this second one, this idea is all about convenience. And this third idea really focuses on performance or durability or cost advantage. And you start to mark off those ideas at what aspect of your company or your product or your brand is that idea conveying. That's not terrible, but here's what happens. You have to select which ones you can fund and actually work on. So you have some selection criteria, and that is different per company, per project. You know, it might just be available budget. We've only got budget to tackle 5, and we're going to give 60% to the top issue, and all the other projects are going to get 20% of our available R&D budget. Or maybe it's just an executive order. Some executive come in and says, I need a project solution that deals with convenience. And you're sitting there as your innovation or R&D team, and you're saying, okay, we got to have a concept that deals with convenience because the boss is not going to be happy if we don't deliver on that. So somehow you sift through that list and you come up with your top list. Now's where the problem really happens. And groups often separate those ideas. And you need to get clarity and focus on what you're going to do with that topic. But now you have one idea, only one concept. You had 70, and you had tons of research, and you had tons of diversified inputs coming into your ideation session. And yet through that really diverse, creative session, you came out with, after your prioritization, one concept that represents all of the insights to safety, and one concept that represents all of the durability content that your team is really an expert and knowledgeable about. And so these singular designs are bearing the weight of all of that rich content. And that is really the trouble here. That is the trouble, because any one of those designs now is going to go into this gauntlet. They're going to have to get over the Tough Mudder, slippery, muddy wall. And you're trying to send that one idea through, and it might get cut, you know, a year into the project because your factory can't make that solution. And so all of the values, let's say, let's look at durability, all of the values around durability get thrown in the trash because one concept couldn't be executed for any numerous list of reasons. So which effort is more likely to succeed here? You know, I am going to put my money on the team getting over the wall versus the one singular, you know, hero trying to get up over the wall. And so at Sundberg-Ferar, we have a full innovation strategy process. If anyone is interested in learning more about Genesis or the overall process, you know, you can email me or reach out to GVOC or hit me up on LinkedIn or something. I'd love to take you through that, but I'm not going to get into the details of the entire process step by step, but I just want to talk about innovation pathways and kind of give you some insights to that. So an innovation pathway is really an evidence document that scripts out where you should focus your design opportunities, and then you design within that pathway. And as you get into product development and someone challenges your idea, you can go back to this document and you can give evidence. When someone says, why are you pursuing that idea? Now you can come back and say, okay, well, these macro trends led to these consumer insights. We have a scoring assessment phase we went through. We have B2B consumer needs that are all aligning together. And all of this is giving your business an opportunity statement that probably began with a hypothesis. And then you went out, you learned, and all of that information is summarized here. And you know, truthfully, on a project like this, every one of those bullet points is actually its own separate document touch point. And we're giving you then now a compelling business story. So this whole innovation pathway is a breeding ground for multiple concepts. And so this is a strategic project. This isn't tactical. I mean, if someone just wants to come in and say, hey, I need you to design the next scissor, that's on the right side of the screen here. That's just tactical. That's just, yeah, the next scissor. I have a SKU at Home Depot. I need to put another scissor on the shelf. But if somebody comes in and says, what's the future of cutting? What is the future of toolbox tools, that's the type of question that you would want to be building innovation pathways around. And just a really fun example of that is a project we did years ago around urban gardening. And so a client came in and said, you know, we want to look at the future of urban gardening. And that might result in pruning shears, but that might result in lightweight soil to get up elevators and stairs. That might result in new watering and irrigation tools. So you can create a whole suite of products out of that. And so that's different than, you know, Ames coming in. We've done that project for Ames True Temper and just did, you know, their next SKU line at Lowe's. So two different approaches. Just wanted to be clear on how we approach them differently. And so one of the more interesting things that I really like to get into on a true innovation pathway development project are attribute models. And when we are done with our discovery research, we get into synthesizing all that data, what we're really trying to dive into are functional and emotional ideals. You know, consumers, they can't tell you what they want from a solution standpoint. They can just tell you what their ideal feelings and functions are. So they can say, I really just want to feel this way. I want to feel trust. I want to feel secure. I want to feel relaxed. And so we try and identify those ideals related to how a product is going to function. We build two sets of models here. And that really is how a team can ideate. What's great about these attribute models is that not only do they give you an ideation starting point, after you've ideated and you get into assessment, you come back to these and then you can use them to filter and critique your ideas and say, well, okay, we came up with this idea. We went through the engineering process. We made some prototypes. Are we still satisfying these original attributes? And just to give you a little insight to it, this is not a lunch break sticky note session. This is weeks of work. I love the photo on the bottom. That's Michelle Zerowick there. And I did a project with her, and we are just cranking on Post-it notes here for probably 2 weeks, I think, on this project. And every one of those little clusters is an interview session. And I personally remember writing all of the orange Post-it notes, and then she went through and wrote all of the yellow. And we had two different tasks that we were performing as we kind of filtered through all that content. And then what we're doing is we're working towards what's up on the upper right here, this luxury. So luxury was the end result. We didn't start with luxury. We didn't say luxury is the attribute model. We actually started with all these other micro attributes and conversation points and anecdotal insights, and then built out multiple topics, and then step back and say, well, what are these all talking about? Oh, they're all talking about luxury, and we try and synthesize a high level topic. So I'm just giving you guys a little vision here of kind of what those attribute models look like once we build them out. And sometimes graphically they look differently, but there's really 3 levels to the model, and there's all the outside content that are maybe verbatims or pieces off of conversations or insights or stakeholder interviews. And then we synthesize that to a middle level, and then we kind of grab all those middle levels and say, what is that all about? So time and statistical support and brand is all building a trust in autonomy. And we take that, and now that's something that a team can go into those ideation sessions and build concepts around. And so I'm pulling this shot up here of Madden, and what I love about it is you've got JJ Watt here, and he's got core attributes, and he's got all his skills. So you got power moves and tackling and play recognition and speed and strength. And so, you know, when you ideate or when you're building a good set of concepts, you're looking at it like they look at these players when they score them. And it's not that he is only strong or only smart with a high player awareness. He's strongest in those, and he does have a lower ability in speed. So he's kind of slow. He's got a 78 in speed, but he's got a 98 in awareness. And this is really how you want to go into building your concepts. And so instead of saying we're going to ideate around safety, or we're going to ideate around durability, you need to say, okay, we recognize we're going to focus on safety, but in some aspects, as we build our attribute models around a certain innovation pathway, safety is at the top of that list, but you know, maybe that one, safety and durability, pair up together in the top one, or maybe durability in the middle and cost advantage are the two that we're looking at as the priority. And you have to compromise. There's no way you can always design for every single attribute, right? As you put more focus on one, the others become compromised. Just like JJ Watt's stats, you know, he's really strong in some areas and weak in others. And so this is where we build the foundation of the pathways and say safety focused or durability focused or convenience focused is the pathway. And what's good about this is now you're building concepts in these clusters. And so maybe you have, you know, 20, maybe you have 5, whatever that number is. But now you begin the R&D process with a family. And here's the power, and here is kind of where it comes back to like the Tough Mudder group getting over the wall, is that concepts are going to fail. They're going to die off. So whether it's, you know, 6 months in or 1 year in, they start to disappear. And as they disappear though, let's say 3 years down the road, look at the bottom there, there's one concept left. And that's great. If you actually get to the finish line with one concept, it's succeeded. But I bet you if you'd started with only one concept focused on convenience, that one concept could have died early in the development pipeline and never made it to the end. And now all of the insights you had around that whole pathway died with it. But now, because you went through this clustering technique and they all lived with evidence and support of each other as they get picked off because of cost or manufacturing or timing in the market, now you're set up to have a much more a high percentage of success with that concept. So I saw a book once with this image on here, and I just made my own version of it because I couldn't find the exact version, but I love it. I think it was like The Power of Many is the book that had this image on it, and I just love this idea that it's like a school of fish. It's all these fish are the ideas, and they come together to create one strong, powerful movement. And kind of bring it back to the Tough Mudder is a scripture quote here that says, "For if they fall, one will lift up his companion, but woe to him who is alone when he falls, for he has no one to help him up." So those are my thoughts here, and I'd love to answer some questions. And Jivak, I know you've got some thoughts and some insights here that we could talk about for a little bit of our time this afternoon.
No, that's beautiful, Dave. I enjoyed the way you broke it up and the analogies that you put forward. Not only JJ Watts, but even this shark person itself too. Does it might read the other way too, right? Means did the shark eat all of those tuna fish, or the other perspectives? But the element is how you put those clusters together to finally get your confidence in your leading one, where you have to invest millions and millions to go forward with that. That's beautiful, and we can start the Q&A itself over here. I have a couple of observations that I did, but by the way, coming back to the shark image, as we are trying to add trivia as we go along. Did you know, or you should not know these things? A shark is supposed to be one of the most dangerous or the apex predators, and what does a shark do every morning? It gets up and just shows everybody it's a shark. But it's the way they start. One of the most I would say brutal, aggressive way is the day they start. So a shark lays eggs inside the body. It still lays eggs, but when the baby comes out of the mother's tummy, it comes as a baby. So even though it comes as a live fish, earlier it was an egg. But the way is it lays a few eggs inside, and the babies, let's say, hatch, and one of them literally eats his brothers and sisters to emerge out victorious, and then he comes out of the tummy. So the first moment he steps outside in the world, he is already a brutal killer.
Wow.
It's like that's how
you always have so many fascinating insights to something you've learned or read. I did not know that.
That's why the sharks have been living along during the time of the Jurassic Park 67 million years ago. Manta ray sharks, they're all surviving here because they mean business. I think I can go and touch a tiger in the wild, but I will never go and touch a tiger even in a cage inside. I think I should be morbidly afraid of sharks. But again, coming back to the world of innovation pathway, thank you again for very leading us succinctly and in a common man's language of how I would say the appreciation of design has to be done as such. So in the morning, I posed a question to the first person, Drew. He's a branding strategist, and the question to him was, and I'm going to ask you the same question. This is the question: if a designer, I don't know, apart from innovation strategy, you are an accomplished industrial designer too. When you're, let's say, working for a pretty established company who have their brand established for 100 years, 50 years, whatever it is. And as a designer, when you have the pencil and you want to start sketching the first, let's say, the product line or the gesture lines or the sketches, what do you think first, the product design or the brand design?
I do think of the brand first, to be honest. I don't know if that's the right answer. There isn't a right answer, but yeah, if I'm looking at a brand, I want to know what is the essence of that brand. So without looking at the product, because product is the end product is, you know, that's trend driven and it changes over time. And what their product looks like now is not what a product's going to look like even, you know, 3 years or 7 years from now, depending on what that product's life cycle is. But what the brand is about, as long as it's an established brand or something, you know, you already have a sense of it. And then if it's not an established brand, I really want to know what's the emotional essence of the brand they're trying to build. So then if I can convey that brand essence on paper, in form, in graphic design, that's then nuanced with trend application into what is, you know, do they want to be rugged or do they want to be high tech? And so those things are nuanced. But first and foremost to me actually is understanding the brand before I look at, if I was going to do something with Nike, I'm not going to look at what Nike's doing right now. I'm just going to think about what's Nike's role and their brand position in whatever sport we're looking at. Is it Nike in running or is it Nike in tennis? You know, they're two totally different things from a visual product standpoint when you actually put the pencil to paper.
That makes sense. It's nice to understand your perspective, and there are plenty of questions coming in. Means I can go with some of the questions I have there based on what I heard. Something like, what phase of a project do you typically build attribute models?
So we build them in synthesis. And so after you've gone out and done all your discovery activities and you've collected all your evidence, that's where that photo of all of us doing, you know, Post-it notes, if I go back to that shot, there we go. That's a synthesis activity. And so you really, you have all your evidence and now you need to sift through that evidence and make sense of it. And that's why I say, you know, some people try to say, well, okay, let's do that in an afternoon or a lunch session. And no, that does not happen that quickly. You know, whether you're listening to transcripts or you're listening to interviews or you're reading transcripts, you need to start to notate it and notate it in a way, in a technique that can go layer by layer by layer into distilled content. So that's definitely all part of synthesis. So we build them there and then use them in the next phase to build the ideation pathways and then ideate.
Yeah, so I love when you mention about this particular thing. By the way, just for the audience to, means I think I do a presentation about the 10 myths of industrial design, and you actually drive the nail completely here, Dave, about innovation workshop is not just a 2 pizza and a lunch break session and post-its on the wall. Yeah, there are post-its on the wall, but the work behind that sometimes have to be literally take weeks, if not less, to build it up over there. And I have seen I have seen the design researchers literally just keep on going through this mental torture, I would say, or mental massage till, and I'm going to not quote, but use what Mark Twain said. You just have to keep at looking at the data. This is the data we look at till beads of blood happen to form on your forehead to see, okay, what is the most important things and how you can finally get them in the form of the cluster. So it's a beautiful thing to go through, but it's lots of effort. So maybe on that, Dave, since you straddled both the ends of innovation strategy and also being an industrial designer, as a brain calories burning, if there is any measure in that, do you think you burn more calories when you're actually sketching and designing the product architecture, or do you burn more calories when you are going through this amazing kind of an black hole?
Oh, I would say that they are extremely equal in brain power effort. They're different, but I do get the same. If you want us to just talk about like an athlete that says they're in the zone, I get into the zone in a couple different areas. And for me personally, doing this type of digestion and playing like private investigator in a way, like you're a detective and you're going through all your research and you're trying to summarize little bits and pieces. That to me is one thing that I get into the zone, and I don't mind spending 2 weeks churning through these boards. I kind of love it. It's like a happy place for me. And the other happy place is just doing a nice, beautiful Photoshop rendering or a key shot rendering and just making the colors and the highlights and the forms look great. I mean, both of those places, it's a very solo activity in the moment. You know, you're drawing by yourself. You're really just thinking creatively. Like any other designers that are listening in or something, you know those moments of just that solo zone where you just hours just melt by, and like 4 hours go by, and I'm just like, oh, that wasn't enough. I need more. These are the two activities for me that do that, whether it's just in that moment of design, sanding something or sketching something. But then this also to me is that area where it's really just creative juices just get going.
I think I know my happy place, and that's where you are right now, with this amazing beach behind you, and with no people, with no people on the beach. I like that perspective. So another thing, when you showed that image, not image, the slide about strategic thinking and tactical thinking, when you're saying we're trying to extract, I would say, nuggets of wisdom from the client, who is the audience? Is the audience different for the tactical project, or is the audience different for the strategic project?
I wouldn't say the audience is different, but a strategic project is definitely broader. So a tactical project more likely is already a engineering or product development, product manager, or a marketing team coming in to work with us, and they've already got their deliverable. It's a show, it's a SKU or a market, and so it's not a different group. It's just a smaller group coming in for a tactical project. If it's a strategy project, this is where we build like a core team, and that core team, I don't want 2 or 3 people to be from the same division. So I want somebody from marketing, and I want somebody from engineering, and I want somebody from finance, and I want somebody, to represent all the different teams. So not that the same team in a tech project isn't represented, but it's definitely broader in a strategic project as we build a team with a client.
And coming back to, I think you use the word design research also as we're going through it. Can you, so when you talk about discovery segment, can you talk about what do you mean by design research and how it might be a different spin as opposed to the market research in the discovery phase?
Yeah, I mean, the difference between design research and market research. So market research, I think, is something more people are familiar with. And market research is trying to understand the data that's out there now. What is the current lay of the land? Design research is what is going to be the future needs. So you're doing current research, but you're doing it with a forecast and an objective to understand future idealities. So it's a different approach. So if you just want to come in and say, what does everybody feel about kitchen appliances in the market? That's going to be market research. Yeah, we need to understand, what do our competitors look like? What are our strengths and weaknesses? What do people feel are problems with current handles in refrigerators? That's market research. Design research is going in and saying, what's happening in the kitchen? And what are future refrigerators going to need to do to satisfy the pain points related to Alexa or local food, and how do you make produce last longer? I mean, those are things that are what I would say I would want to learn in a design research approach to try and jump forward and inspire design team. That's what it is. It's all about inspiring your design team to innovate. So That's really how I could summarize the difference between design research and market
That's
research.
actually really beautiful. Means it just makes sense about like also you try to think about forecasting. That's a different way, but actually you are accumulating these smaller grails of evidence from the actual kitchens you go through, from the actual field sites you go through, and you build, let's say, your hypothesis on this micro evidences rather than just macro economical forecast. Like next year we are going to sell 17 million vehicles. Like, yeah, every automaker is going to use that I would say statistics to build elements when we know the market may not be ready with the cumulative additions over there. So the micro evidence eventually lets you know, as I think as you said, eventually you want to tell to the chairman or your sponsor from the company, like this is the product to go with. But why? Because you can go and align all those elements and you have those evidences right in place to bolster the decision making process. I like that. There's questions that keep on coming in. One question from John. Breakthrough technologies are rare. So technologies. But have you seen or have experience in which a breakthrough technology initiated an innovation pathway?
Initiated the innovation pathway. I could see where a technology enabled. So I wouldn't, it's kind of one of those, how do you want to use the word and the semantics of it? But
You can use your interpretation of the question,
yeah,
but it's a pretty interesting question.
I don't say often that it's a good practice to take a technology and run around and look for holes to fill with it. That's usually not the right approach. What you want to do is identify the need and then critique a technology you're assessing to say, does that technology fulfill the need? So to say, did the technology initiate a pathway? Probably not. The pathway should be identified through, and we have a quadrant approach to discovery research. There's 4 categories we always do our discovery research in, and one of them is technology. So there's users, design, industry, and technology. So if in your technology investigation quarter of your discovery research, you identify an emerging technology, that's great. You put that in there as a piece of evidence. As you're building the innovation pathway, absolutely, it can be a foundational element. But I wouldn't say that that would be what would initiate it. You have to combine, again, there's no silos. So you have to combine it with the functional and emotional attributes, and then use that technology as evidence to say this pathway should exist. So I would say it's really more of an enabler and giving you confidence that you should tackle it because you have that technology that can enable the ideal experience.
I completely second your thought, but I'm just trying to put a little bit more. There is no follow-up question from John, but try to be the speak from him. If somebody is holding you at a gunpoint, like right now, we are all under house arrest, and virtual technology is kind of has to be leveraged. So somehow it's not a breakthrough technology, but right now that's the only available option for most of us who can still do work remotely. By the way, Sundberg-Ferar, we are all completely enabled and working remotely. This was not an ideal way, but right now we have used that technology to work. So I think that might be the element of how you have the experience in what a breakthrough technology initiated an innovation pathway, and it might tell something else for the future of education or something else. Would that be his question?
Yeah, so if you're talking about education, it's the, what is the future of virtual education? The pathway is rooted in needing to learn with distance, right? I mean, that's why I would not say the pathway is virtual, let's say conference rooms. That's not the foundation of the pathway. The foundation of the pathway is remote learning. And how do you remote learn? So ways you can remote learn might not necessarily be through video conferencing. Remote learning might be through mailing projects to each other. So what if one of your solutions is that you still want kids to be hands-on and work with each other? So you build a system where a team of kids pass a prototype from one person to the next person to the next person to the next person, so they can physically interact with a product. So that's where the root is, remote learning. Now, how do we enable remote learning? Well, you know, webcams and Zoom are one of the technology enablers, but there could be others. And then if you say, well, what I really want to get is people to still be hands-on with tactile physical goods. Now, what if we are dealing with issues where, okay, well, so for 5 kids to mail each other or send a drone to deliver their, you know, little widget that they're working on, they're 3D printing in their home. Maybe they're taking 3D printing, they 3D print something. The other kid in their project 3D prints a piece of the project, and they want to combine them, but they don't want to share germs. Now, maybe a technology opportunity is UV cleansing units. You know, everybody's got a UV box in their house that they can put anything smaller than a shoe inside a box, and it zaps it with UV light and it cleans it. Now I know I can mail it to somebody else, and when they get it, it's clean upon arrival. So that's where a pathway can lead to multiple concepts that are all based or rooted in the same need.
I love it when you got me there when you said you have to understand, as you demonstrated, understanding how you even ask the questions would help you understand the problem better. Somehow, even I asked you the question about virtual. Virtual is an I would say sub level, and you have to look at the root. Root is remote learning. I absolutely that really makes sense. See, that's the reason you're here, Dave. I'm always learning. So talking about those pathways, can you just ideate the pathways?
Yeah, I don't think you would ideate the pathway. Now, you could hypothesize. So yeah, I mean, yes, you could hypothesize some pathways, and we do sometimes do just hypothesis activities. So if a client doesn't even know where to go next before we jump into a 6 or 8 month long project, you might just want to do a hypothesis activity. And that's where you could bring a bunch of people together and they say, I think there's a pathway, there's an opportunity. We've got 5 technologies in the sector, and I want to you know, build a pathway around it. Yeah, sure, you could do that. But there's a difference between hunches and confident statements, right? I mean, yep. You have a hunch, I have a hunch, and when we have a lot of smart people in a room, we all have you know, things we've been mulling around in our brains for years, developing ideas and developing perspectives. And sometimes you know, a client will say, you know what, we got a lot of smart people, we don't need to go do any research. You know, people like to skip research because research takes a lot of time and money. And they say, well, let's just get a bunch of experts in a room, and we'll just ideate the pathways. And I'm not saying that's not impossible. And it's really good to do that if you just need to get clarity on where you should target your efforts. But it's still really a glorified hunch. And if you don't go out and you don't learn new information, and you don't create a formal knowledge gap document that says, these are our knowledge gaps, this is what we need to go learn, and then go learn it, you're really just creating glorified hunches or glorified hypotheses. So you can do that, sure. But then when you actually get into putting money on the table, or you go to your executive board, or you go to your stakeholders and say, okay, I need you to fund this, how confident are you? They're going to say, well, okay, show me the evidence. Oh, well, you know, 5 of us got in a room and we wrote it all down, and we just, you know, made the words look pretty. I mean, that's really what you're doing. So an innovation pathway is not just fancy words on paper that were you know, wordsmithed in 4 hours. It's real data, real insights that now give you the ability to create a statement, not a hypothesis.
I love the distinction between those two. Can you elaborate on one point? As you're mentioning about the time, you mentioned about 6 to 8 months, and that's, I understand, means we work in the same studio. I understand the seriousness of something like this for a big company or for big projects. But that's not just that's just one pathway. There can be done something else in the smaller timelines too, correct?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what I was just talking about is like a hypothesis activity can be a real short one if you're just not even sure. You know, you might have a couple developing technologies, or your marketing team might say, well, we really need to, you know, we need to stop making boots and we need to start making shoes. Okay, well, you know, we've got some thoughts about shoes. We're set up to build boots. So if you just want to do a hypothesis activity, you could just do that. It's not a full 8-month project. It could be, you know, a week-long immersion and hypothesis activity, or you need to do some concept development. Maybe you already come in with a bunch of research, and we all look at the research. We say, hey, that's actually really good research. We don't need to reinvent the wheel here. And, you know, you just need to synthesize it. You know, that happens a lot. Companies say, we've already got, you know, 25 products in the pipeline, but we're struggling to prioritize them. It kind of goes back to my prioritization slides where I was talking about how did you prioritize them? And maybe we just need to sit there. So there's a lot of different smaller activities you can break out of. And that's, you know, kind of why I said if anybody's interested in all of the tools and techniques we use within our Genesis process, all of them can be broken out into smaller activities.
Yeah, I mean, so that's beautiful too. From a design research and product databases, I had a couple of other things coming over here. Gather evidences along the way. The suite of products also. So there are again beautiful elements coming into. Just a question again. The process itself is fascinating. Is there a way to digitally capture and analyze the data so that the team can trace the process?
Well, we do trace all of the process, and all of the workshops, everything's documented. And so there is a real paper trail, digital trail that's turned into, you know, whether it's PowerPoint or Excel spreadsheets or whatnot. One of the things though, that I'll tell you about that really was shocking when I started to use it is, how do you take a board like that of Post-it notes and digitize that? And it's been out there for a couple of years, actually. So 3M, bless their hearts, they have all these Post-it notes out there that we should probably buy stock in 3M just for the,
Yeah, we should. I think every design studio should.
And so they have an app called Post-it, and you can take a photo of a wall of Post-it notes, and it image recognizes each square and separates them into individual elements, and you can export it as a PowerPoint file. So
Wow.
if you clean them up and you kind of separate them so they're not overlapping, you could take a photo of a Post-it note wall and completely digitize it into a PowerPoint. So that's what I do. I do that every time we do a big workshop that I have all these elements, and I have PowerPoint documents of all of the photos of the individual Post-it notes, actually.
That's pretty interesting, and that's hopefully people have to write still legibly on that, right? It cannot be my handwriting, because
We
I
still have
think
to be able
only
to
I
read.
could read my handwriting right now.
Right, somebody's still got to read it.
I still have to print it rather than just. I would have been a doctor, a really good doctor, based on my hieroglyphics that I do. Coming back to just the process of design as such. Has it ever happened? I mean, we have worked with so many clients. Sometimes it happens that the client understands the need of an innovation strategy, but somehow, maybe because of the budget constraints or time constraints, which are always there, that we have to rush, that you are forced to rush and design an object. As a designer, individually, how do you wrestle with that perspective? So we know the intentions would be good. They want to do it. They should be doing this, but somehow they said, like, you know what? It's a tactical project. We understand that. Let's just do this and put this next thing out, even though they should be following the idealized pathway. Typically, then how do you gain their confidence?
I mean, it's definitely our job as partners on a project to raise your hand if you disagree or think there's a better way to do something. And, you know, that's something that takes relationship building, and you have to have credibility with a client to say, hey, I know you asked me to do this, but I'm going to politely disagree. And we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we didn't do that, right?
Correct.
And so I think any of us that are good designers can take a challenge and develop a good product solution, regardless of what the category is. But I definitely think it's the right thing for a good designer to be able to object and say, I think we should look at it differently. Maybe we're not going down the right path. And if they eventually say, no, this is what we need, we do our best job. I mean, I was one time on a project so convinced that the solution should be a cylinder, I kept drawing it as cylinders. Now, I didn't stop drawing it other ways, but I just kept drawing this one product as a cylinder, to the point where the CMO in a room in a session says, if I see one more cylinder, you're not coming back. And I said, okay, all right, a box it is. It's a box.
Sometimes we have to, as being with that amazing client consultancy relationship, we have to do that. But what you say is right. We have to. We are there as a consultant. We have to it will be remiss if we don't let them know why we are doing this way and why not the other way. There are many questions, and I want to still save the last few minutes for your nuggets of wisdom. But let's try to squeeze in one more question as such. So. Innovation strategy, innovation pathways is amazing as such. Note from David Thiem. I was there for that review. David Thiem is our chief design officer for the studio as such too. So right now I know we could only do so much in 45 minutes for innovation strategy / innovation pathways, but is this only for big enterprises, big projects, or can it be done for medium-sized companies or even stage A, stage 2 startup companies?
Yeah, we can scale. We can scale to meet any size project. So yeah, clearly a 6 to 8 month long engagement project is really definitely geared towards larger companies. But as we kind of talked about earlier, you can scale down the activities and you can run those activities at any level. So actually, we've been talking a lot more about this regarding startups, just amongst our team, that startups are coming in and they have a great innovation. They have a patent and they want to make use of that patent, and yet they just don't have market insight. And so we're sitting there and we've worked with them and said, are you sure this is where you want to go? And it's the root of our innovation strategy mindset, is that, what do you do when you don't know what to do next? They think they know what they want to do next, and they want to make the most out of that patent they've got now. But it's really good to sometimes take a time out and think about it from a high level strategic perspective and work with a startup and say, are there other areas that your patent could apply? Are you even going after the right market? Like, you have a technology, but there might be 2 other completely different industries that would actually have higher revenue potential with your solution. And you're actually, just because you're an enthusiast, you're looking at one market, but it's actually not the right business choice.
We should have maybe another webinar or something talking about that specific element, because it is almost like kryptonite. Because if somebody comes with as you said, the technology perspective, like, I can do this and I already have spent 8,000 with a lawyer and I need to now do something based on that, and through the process of innovation pathways that might not be the right one to go to the market, then it's literally sometimes a waste of money for that startup to think about owning that area. So that's a pretty amazing element. And Lania, we can try to think about how to add that topic to some of the webinars down the line. It's a pretty important topic in the world of medium to startup companies as such. There are still more questions coming in, but I think I want to resort to Mr. Dave. I have been asking all the speakers and you, our last and absolutely not the least speaker, for their words of wisdom. You're doing really good. I personally admire your thought process from design and innovation strategy. There are students and some of the earlier career audience members also over there. What might be your perspectives for them to think, not just about innovation strategy, just, I would say, design life in general?
So yeah, I knew this was coming, and I thought about this a little bit, and I'm going to kind of get a little deep here. My dad is a therapist, so I'm okay sitting on the couch and reflecting on my life. I'm used to it. And I was thinking back to before I went to design school. I'm an only child. I grew up an only child, perfectionist, and often was frustrated with maybe other people, not putting in the effort or performing the way I thought they should, or getting things done the way I did as a perfectionist. And even a couple of friends nicknamed me Anal Dave because I was just so tightly wound and a little anal retentive, and totally broke that. Maybe not 100%, but I'd like to say basically broke that going through CCS. And when you go through an art school and you learn how to take critique, the ambiguity of critique. I mean, I would go in and I would work so hard. And of course, I would think my idea was fantastic. And I would just put, hours and hours and hours into a project. And I'd walk in, I'd present it, and I'd find out it wasn't that great. And it breaks your ego. And so my pearl of wisdom is that I think we all, not just in work, but in life and in friendships and in relationships, we all need to learn how to take critiques and actually try and give critiques more often. It's really beneficial to have an open conversation with someone else who's not going to be offended. Like, we need to stop getting so offended. And if you have a relationship and you have a rapport with somebody, you're not flattering them. Flattery is insincere. But if you have a conversation with somebody, start by just giving them a compliment. Like, tell them what they're doing great. It's not flattery if you really mean what you're saying. And you start there and then say, hey, I love what you're doing. What if you tried to do this or you tried to do that? And it might work better. And so it's really helpful if we do that to each other. And you got to be mature enough to receive that. And I mean, I've had bosses come to me and be scared to tell me something that they wanted me to do better at, because they just didn't want, to ruffle my feathers, as, maybe I was in my 20s and somebody had to come to me and say, you really need to do better at this. And I'm sitting there going, thank you. Like, please tell me. I am not perfect. I need to learn. But if I'm living in this bubble and no one is ever interacting with me, telling me how I can be better at something, how am I ever going to know where I need to improve? And so this is my pearl of wisdom, is just let's be more proactive with, and sometimes I hate the word critique, but be more proactive with constructive advice. I don't even want to say constructive criticism, because it's not criticism, it's constructive advice. And be willing to receive it and have an open mind to make each other better, because that's the goal, right? Isn't the goal when you do that is just try to help your spouse or help your coworkers just be better at what they do?
I like it. I knew that. That's pretty amazing. I love it. Basically, accept critique and also give critique, or take time to share what you know to your fellow human beings. Love it. Thank you once again, Dave, for joining us and for your time, taking out on a sunny beach over there while I'm here in Michigan. Again, coming back to the audience as such. Thank you, everybody. I think the 2 day session went on really great. Thanks for all your questions, and they are still coming in. I'm sorry if we could not go through all of them, but it's pretty amazing. We and Lane are getting emails also about what other speakers or other topics they would want to see. So we are responding to that. Already, I think Lania showed yesterday, we will be having the next topic on service design. That will be the next month's webinar. We will have Owen Foster join us for that. So that's already in place, and we will try to, there you go. I like the sunglasses, man. You need to have a cocktail in your hand. I think the thing is coming back and trying to not just this, but summarize everything of what we are doing, at least from Sundberg-Ferar as such, means good design is good business. We saw that truth, the goodness, being right, comes so often from all these, I would say, different avenues too. That particular maxim means it started back with Mr. IBM's founder, Watson. He started with that particular idea, and we are just now expanding on it. But that particular thing has always been true, and will always will be. Means there'll always be other elements that will come in and out, but the greatest way and one of the sustainable way to make sure you are putting some purposeful, meaningful content out there. It might be through a product or a service or in software, will always has to be good. And then the good definition changes in the categories too. Just like I think the words of wisdom or pieces of nuggets, I think two elements on that. I think I remember vividly Charles Ray Eames' element about his quote, and I can paraphrasing: choose your corner, right, and pick away at it intensely and at the best of your ability and quality, and then you might have the intention to save the world or change the world. So you will be great at something, hopefully at something, but you will always be good at something. Do that to your best, bring it out, and eventually find other people who will help you along. Exactly, coming back to the first screen, Dave, that you had about building on the top of each other. By the way, that analogy is perfect from the world of OCR to the world of design, industrial design thinking too. And last but not the least is, apart from the abilities or the skills or the talent, most of them, the things can be learned. I think the greatest thing that anybody would need is to have the right ambition. I think the ambition, the crave to go and do something, your objectives, your goals, those literally mold you and will help you align what you need to learn, what you need to teach, what you need to share and collaborate with. So, and it doesn't matter wherever you are. It might be a student, you might be a mid-level career, you might be a CEO, you might be a big company, small company. If you're in a big company, then the ambition might be, okay, what will be the best way to use my budget and try to bring a little bit more better things to life, right? Means no matter what, one of the reasons that we exist as a studio is try to make each and every object or interaction or service a little bit more better, and no doubt a little bit more beautiful too. So that's I think would be the end of I would say these 2 days. Thank you for joining us. Thank you once again, all the speakers across the board yesterday and today. We just had a great lineup. I'm just happy that they all said yes on such a short notice and be available from the virtuality of it. Till and something else, I think Lanea will keep us posted. Eventually, yes, there would be the recordings available for this. We will try to break them on the top of every hour. Try to make sure we talk about brand or marketing or innovation pathways. And if you have registered or RSVP'd, you will get that link too. Okay, I think that should be it. Lanea, let me know if I missed something before we say bye-bye and log out. Hopefully, I covered most of the things. As usual, feel free to like us on Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, send us emails and all those things. And till that time, keep on washing hands with soap. Simplest thing will save us all. Thank you, sir. Over and out. And ladies, over and out.